Coming up this week on Sporting Journal Radio.
Anglers have collected more 12-plus inch brook trout in 3 years than the Minnesota DNR has done in like 7 surveys over 30 years. So
I popped a tendon off my arm.
The Siskowitz spawning in, 300 feet of water on Lake Superior? Yeah. Talk about...
In the spring.
In the spring.
Broadcasting on the Sporting Journal Radio Network, wherever you get your podcasts, or watch on YouTube.
Fish on right now.
Well, we're here at the 2024 Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic, presented by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. And our guest now is Jeremy Smith. I fish, I hunt, and always will.
It's just to look out for your everyday hunter, angler, and trapper that's out there.
A Fish Hunt Forever production. This is Sporting Journal Radio.
All right, welcome to the show. I'm Bret Amundson. That's Dan over there. What's up, Dan?
Hi. Wow, it's kind of a weird angle. I got to crouch down. Weird. Am I going to the mall later?
Should I stand up a little bit then? All right, this is a good start.
Yep.
Good start.
Sweet.
Show.
Awesome.
Hey, you know what else is starting right now?
Hang in there, Brett! Hang in there!
What was that?
Hang in there.
Okay. Hanging in.
Brett, you with us?
I'm here.
Okay, good.
I'm with you.
Just checking.
Turkey season is here. And we're not hunting this week, so I don't really feel like it's turkey season yet, just because I'm going to wait till next week. So we're going to talk mostly fishing, but I know some guys have been connecting on turkeys already. I saw Ben Bredigan was out there with his daughter scouting turkeys.
I think they got one, didn't they?
They got one. Yeah. I think I'm not sure who it was. Somebody that was hunting with him shot one, a relative. So congratulations. I've been seeing some turkeys strutting. I've been out there scouting a little bit, seeing some birds that are active. So I'm pretty excited about it. It's also tick season, so be careful. Use precaution, whether it's some sort of insect shield. The Sitka stuff is good, or use some permethrin. That's I use both of those things, so I don't like ticks. Be careful while you're out there. But we're going to talk fishing this week, Dan fishing. We're going to talk a little bit. Joe Henry didn't make it to the SJR 500. He had an issue, so we're going to find out what that was. And if you didn't see some of the videos that came out of the party at Riverbend, we're going to show you some of the shenanigans that took place and talk about some of the things we saw on the river, including a helicopter lots of times. So that's coming up. And I never get sick of talking about lake trout, and there was some news that came out about coasters up on Lake Superior. So Cory Goldsworthy, who's the Lake Superior Area Fisheries Supervisor, is going to join us, talk about some potential changes to the Lake Superior management, and also what's going on out there with the Lakers and also the Brookies, and just an overall picture of the fishery and how things are going. What's the health and the status of the Lake Superior fishery?
Lakers are playing the Timberwolves in the playoffs.
Oh, there you go. I did not know. The Wild are in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, you mentioned you were going to learn what's going on with the Lakers. So I figured I'd tell you they're playing the Timberwolves in the playoffs.
See, we're here to help, inform, and educate on Sporting Journal Radio. Let's go. Who's the show brought to you by this week, Dan?
Lake of the Woods Tourism. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital of the world. Plan a fishing trip for this summer at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. OnX Hunt. See private land boundaries, offline maps, and more. Take 20% off a new membership with the code SJR20. Haybell Heights Campground and Resort. Fish out of a boat on Devil's Lake this summer. Learn more at haybellheights.com. Tasman Lake Lodge kept world record lake trout and giant pike at Saskatchewan's Tasman Lake. Learn more at tasmanlake.com. Prairie Sportsman, new season is here. You can watch episodes anytime at the Prairie Sportsman YouTube channel and Guardian Eagle Resort. Plan a trip for next summer, the Ontario waters of Guardian Eagle Resort. You can fly directly from the Twin Cities. Learn more at guardianeagle.com.
That's right, and it's time for Headlines, brought to you by Guardian Eagle Resort.
Headlines.
That's right, and we are giving away a trip for two to Guardian Eagle Resort. You can sign up at fishhuntforever.com, sportingjournalradio.com, same website, and you'll be able to fly directly out of the Twin Cities, land right there at the resort, spend 3 days fishing and catching as many walleyes as you want, plus big pike, delicious food, and more. Dan, what's your favorite there? Is it the fishing? Is it the flight? Is it the food? Is it the fire? What do you like about it?
Well, I think the answer is obvious. It's the fishing.
Fishing's always key.
Pretty. You go on a fishing trip. You always love the extra amenities, and those really tie a trip together. But at the end of the day, you're there. It's a fishing trip. You're there to fish, and the fishing exceeded expectations.
Very good. Guardian Eagle Resort in Ontario. Sign up to win that trip. You will not regret it. It is a great time. All right, some headlines. The Minnesota DNR is waiving vehicle permit fees at all 73 state parks and rec areas on Saturday, April 26th. It's Free Park Day. It's one of 4 times each year which the DNR waives the requirement for a vehicle permit at state parks and rec areas. The 4 fee-free days are spread out over the year, giving people a chance to visit the parks throughout each season. And you remember I bought that state park permit? I can't remember what park we were at, probably filming, and I bought a state park tag. Maybe... I don't remember, but I'm glad. Well, my point is, I'm glad I didn't put it on the windshield of the Fundra 1.0 because I'd have to buy a new permit now.
Oh yeah, I suppose scrape that off. Well, there's a lesson to you. If you want to use your state park sticker all year, don't crash a truck.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What's your favorite state park, Dan?
Good question. Used to go to a bunch when we were a kid. We'd make annual camping trips there. And usually actually used to go just do a day trip up to the North Shore and bounce around to Split Rock and Gooseberry. Sometimes get adventurous, go up to Tetagooch, or we did camp at Judge C.R. Magny way up in Grand Portage. That was kind of cool. It was really cold. You probably have to fall back on Split Rock because there's a really cool lighthouse there.
There's a cool lighthouse. When it comes to North Shore up there, Gooseberry is tough for me to beat. And my favorite memory from there was I was working for a different TV show and I stopped there just to film. It was during the winter, so I was like, this is cool. I'm going to do a live Facebook. I'm going to film how frozen Gooseberry Falls are because that's always a big thing. Like seeing them frozen, it's kind of a cool deal. It's always different every year. And I did that, and I remember being live. I'm like, here's the falls right here, and I turned around to show the river down below. And just as I turned around, a bunch of deer started crossing the river down below me. You couldn't make it up. The timing was perfect, and that was one of my favorite memories there. Well, Gooseberry and Devil's Kettle at C.R. Magny State Park have been nominated for USA Today's 10 Best Readers' Choice Awards in the Best State Park and Best Hiking Trail categories, respectively. Voting is open to the public right now and will end May 12th, and you can vote once per day category. So if you want to vote for Gooseberry or the Devil's Kettle Trail at USA Today.
So many steps on that trail to actually see the falls. Way cool falls, but oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So many steps.
North Shore is such a cool part of Minnesota, and where we live, it's so different. It's amazing that we're in the same state. But there are some cool things that come out of Western Minnesota, like the Kurt Pahowski Fish Company story that's coming to Prairie Sportsman this Sunday night. The history of commercial fishing in Lac Parle, Marsh Lake, Big Stone, Traverse, and the Minnesota River Valley out here is being featured this week, and you can see a little sneak peek of it right now. On the next Prairie Sportsman, we visit with Kurt Pahowski and learn about his family business and his effort to preserve its rich history.
It was just like a family reunion. We'd laugh, we'd talk.
Next, we look at the efforts being made to clean up Mille Lacs.
It's now illegal to place any kind of garbage on the ice.
Finally, we're in for a sweet treat with Nicole Zempel.
This great burst of fruity juiciness.
That Kurt Pahowski was a really fun interview with him. And I didn't know this, but they had 1 million pound, was it 1 million fish or 1 million pounds? 1 million pounds that they pulled out. I think it took them 3 days to pull. It was like one net, 1 million pounds. Took them 3 days to pull that net out of the lake. And I think that was on Lac Parle, if I remember correctly.
Marsh Lake, maybe?
Oh, no, I bet it was Marsh.
Yeah, that's one thing we learned. Your fillet of fish from McDonald's may have come from Big Stone, Lac Parle, or Marsh Lake, or,
Sheephead.
Yeah.
Sheephead are so underrated, and I've eaten them. I think they taste fine. And, look at this one. My brother, your dad, Wade, caught. That was 39.5 inches. I had no idea that's got to be...
It was pushing state record. Yeah. Think how expensive that would have been if you were a commercial fisherman.
There's your catch 10 of those, and you got your 1 million pound catch right there.
I don't know if that math adds up.
Probably not, but pretty close. Anyway.
Probably not.
That was a big fish right there. And the Mille Lacs Keep It Clean story, the Keep It Clean movement started up at Lake of the Woods, and then it caught on at Upper Red and then also at Mille Lacs. We had the chance to go up and film at Mille Lacs this winter. And part of the reason we did that was because of this crew coming over from the Lake Tahoe area and did some diving and cleanup. So we've got the story coming where you get to see these divers going into Mille Lacs and picking stuff up off the bottom, and some of that stuff's been there for forever, for a long, long time. So a lot of efforts being taken on Mille Lacs to keep it clean over there. You can see that this Sunday night on Pioneer PBS out of Granite Falls, or check your local listings. You can watch it on the Prairie Sportsman YouTube channel, or this summer on a PBS station near you. One last thing here before we start talking to Joe Henry, Dan, is there was an accident in the MLF tournament, the bass fishing tournament, and this was down in Alabama.
Smith Lake, I believe. Lewis
Smith Lake. The Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, this comes from WHNT News. There's a multi-boat crash on Lewis Smith Lake. The Alabama Law Enforcement Agency said the two-boat crash killed 58-year-old Joey Broom when he was hit by another bass boat there, and Broom was pronounced dead on the scene. So they have canceled the rest of the competition. Just a sad, sad story. If you're out there in tournaments or just on the water anywhere, just please be careful.
There's also a crash at the MPFL event this morning on Lake Norman.
Oh, really? I didn't hear about that.
Nobody was injured in that one, but yeah, so two boat crashes in two separate tournament circuits on two separate lakes. I don't know if it was foggy down there this morning or what was going on, or people just aren't paying attention, but bad deal. Bad deal. Always wear your life jacket and your kill switch.
Cory Goldsworthy from Lake Superior is coming up to talk about coaster brook trout and lake trout on the Big Lake. And Joe Henry will talk about Rainy River when we come back.
Now is the time to start thinking about chasing big walleyes on Devil's Lake. Get on the fish at Haybale Heights Campground and Resort. Haybale Heights makes it easy for you to make memories on legendary Devil's Lake with guided fishing and lodging packages. Or bring your own boat and rent one of their cabins on East Bay. Haybale Heights offers a private marina, fish cleaning station, and the opportunity to relax and enjoy your bucket list trip to Devil's Lake, North Dakota. To book your trip, visit haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com.
All right, we're going to talk to Joe Henry now from Lake of the Woods Tourism. Joe, I know you had a little bit of some bad luck there getting ready for the SJR 500, so you didn't make it up, but you missed a good time.
I'll tell you, we talked about the SJR 500 about 721 times leading up to it. Yeah. And then Sunday night, before I had my boat ready to go, I tested my motors. I didn't want to be in that long, rainy river line and not have my motors started. I mean, everything was dialed in, ready to roll. Proactive, I went to take a big old Costco bin full of tackle boxes, and I can never break things apart. I always have to do things one time only, and so anyway, I set this great big bin up on the side of my boat, and normally I just would set up on the side of the boat and slide it in, and I must have had jig heads on that one side, so it was weighted down. When I set it up there, it just got sucked in unexpectedly, and long story short, it popped a tendon off my arm. So MRIs and everything else, and it was just partially torn, so I don't need surgery, but I'm in a brace for 6 weeks and just healing. But luckily, it's in my left arm, and I can reel with that one, so I'm good to go.
Well, and it's so easy to fish up there, Joe. You could have done it one-handed. I mean, we caught piles of walleyes. Our big, I think, was 26, but we caught a pile of them in that 23 to 26 inch range. So it was really, really solid walleye fishing. But sturgeon, once again, I don't know what was bigger, Dan. What do you think with the sturgeon fishing? Was that a bigger story, or is the sturgeon stash contest a bigger story this year's tournament?
Well, depends who you ask, because some people just saw things they'd rather not see again.
Oh, come on.
Well, let me ask you a question. Who won the sturgeon stash contest?
Well, Kevin Hendricks, the Royal Dutchman, ended up winning, but we had some solid entries. If you look at last week's podcast, you can see all the entries. We had like Dan's mom took your advice and put a fake mustache on and was part of the contest.
Creative.
Lost.
She did lose.
Hey, Dan, it's your mom. You got to give her props for creativity.
Well, yeah,
being part of it, joining in, team player. This is your mom.
But there's also some tough love, and maybe do better for next year.
What? I think it's time. You have a lot of listeners that really are fond of your mustache. I break it to them and pull that sucker off right now.
It's fake.
Gone.
Well, I shaved the beard off for the first time in, 15 years or something like that. It's coming back now, but I wanted to set an example. I was not part of the sturgeon contest, sturgeon stash contest, but I wanted to look like a sturgeon, so I had the whiskers. Yeah, and then I had the scoots along the side, and then I had a sturgeon hawk, I called it. And then I had Scott Stieber help me shave the back of the head. I did most of it, then he did the back of the head because I couldn't see it. And I said, just shave a tail, like into the back of my head back there. And he got done, and he started laughing, and he goes, it looks more like a mustache. He's like, we need to get you some googly eyes. So that night, after the podcast, somebody brought it up, and Brandy Johnson's like, I have googly eyes. Of course she does. So she went and got them. I thought this was hilarious. Dan did not think it was as funny.
It's a little disturbing. So if you're friends with me on Snapchat, you would have seen that video on there as well. I wanted to show one more. Show this one to David because it's a video, but I just took the screenshot of it because David put, I don't know whose hats he put on his head, but he's wearing everybody's hat in the bar. And it got 50,000 views on my Snapchat, which I think is the funnier part of this whole picture, just because there's so many people that thought him wearing all the hats.
Well, you can tell David. David's he's a few in there.
No, not David.
Well, and the best part, I'll give David credit. He's farming today, so he couldn't be here on the show. But he had this big beard that he'd been working on for a long time, and he was not going to shave anything into it. And he showed up at the party and had some kind of thing going on there. He had
Hulk Hogan.
Oh, that's what it was.
Pretty much.
Kind of.
Hulk Hogan, and then he had a cowboy hat on and
the shades.
Yeah, what are those stupid sunglasses called?
The pit vipers. Yeah. Yeah. He thought he had it. Like it was impressive. There's no question. It was a good look. And then I walked in with a mohawk. And I don't think he was expecting to see that. So, and we weren't a part of the contest. We just wanted to set the bar high for all the contestants. And Kevin, and then we fished with Kevin, the Royal Dutchman, after the tournament, Joe. And he was mad that I'd shaved mine. And I got rid of the mohawk. The hair is coming back up on top. Ooh, this hat apparently was real tight. That line. I got the hair coming back. He was mad that I shaved it because he kept his sturgeon stash when we filmed for Prairie Sportsman the next day. And I wanted to show this video because it's wild to see these helicopters going up and down the river every day, Joe.
Yeah, I did an interview earlier in the week with, you may have heard of the news organization Politico.
Yeah.
And when I sharing different way, how are the new tariffs and proposed tariffs affecting business? They were most interested in the Northwest angle and how is it affecting people. And, it's not affecting us a ton. Everybody's aware of it, of course, but it's not actually affecting us a ton yet. But when I told him that we got helicopters flying up and down the border nonstop, oh my gosh, he was very interested in that. In fact, I sent him a couple of Facebook links with, the helicopter going up and down. That one from Charlie Dharmer of the helicopter hovering over that poor guy in a tiller.
Yeah. Well, did you see
that one?
I have.
We filmed it.
Yeah, and I did the same thing, and mine had 1.5 million views. Like, it's insane. It was crazy.
Was the helicopter hovering over a boat?
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, it was right away when we got there at Birchdale. We walk up, and I don't even know if we just put the boat in, I think, or something.
Yeah, we were getting checked by the game warden there because he was standing at the boat with us.
That's right.
I wasn't even, we were still on shore, or the boat was in the water, but we were on shore dealing with that stuff. But yeah, and then
we watched them go hover over a couple of different boats and then take off. And that was the first day. And then after that, we just saw them going up and down. And to be fair, we weren't seeing other boats in Canadian waters anymore after that. So maybe that's why we didn't see them hover. But they're always hovering over a Canadian boat.
When we had the spring meeting, OPP, Ontario Provincial Police, were part of our spring meeting for the Rainy River that we do before the season each year. And they said that there'll be a higher presence. And the reason there was is because, President Trump had mentioned that traditionally the borders were quite porous, both down in Mexico and up in Canada. And, they didn't want bad people coming over. They didn't want drugs coming in. So consequently, he said, it's going to be important to shore those things up, and that'll help relieve some of the tariffs that are coming. And Canada sent, or at least Ontario sent, I know hundreds of I don't know if it was a couple hundred or what the number was specifically, but they sent a number of people to the border to shore up that border. And they said that, you'll see a higher presence this year for spring fishing. It's not because of the fishing at all. It's, we're looking for people coming over the border that shouldn't be coming over the border. We're looking for drugs. We're looking for weapons, things like that. So they said, one thing we do know is that, sometimes bad people that are doing illegal things will disguise themselves like locals, like anglers. And we've seen that before in past years, ice fishing with, people running stuff with snowmobiles and collapsible fish houses on our big lake. And so they're aware of those tricks, and that's what they're looking for. They're not there to harass anglers or do anything else. And
I had no problem with it.
Getting the boat number and calling it in, I'm guessing. I don't know.
Yeah, I had no problem with it. I welcomed it, and we got checked multiple times by COs. I think pretty much every day we got checked while we were out there. And I have zero problem with it. They were all great. They were all nice. And, of course, we were all legal, so there was no issues. So I don't have any problem with enforcing regulations on our resources. So it was good.
Isn't it nice? I do know that we get a lot of attention up at Lake of the Woods. We get attention in March when we can, when the rest of the state closes down to walleye and pike fishing end of February. We go that whole extra, to April 14th. So that whole extra month of March on the ice. Traditionally. And then, of course, when the Rainy River pops open, there's a lot of traffic, and they send a lot of COs typically to Lake of the Woods and the Rainy River from other areas also. And I will tell you this, that across the board, there's always exceptions to every rule, but across the board, I hear really good things about the Minnesota DNR conservation officers. As long as you're polite to them and provide them what they're looking for, the licenses and things they ask for, they've been very good. And I also hear the same thing out of fairness about OMNR, Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources folks, for those who choose to fish in Ontario waters. I heard they're also very polite, and they're just trying to do their job. And if you're nice to them, they're nice to you, which is with a lot of people, right?
Absolutely. Well, I want to talk sturgeon real quick because we didn't fish sturgeon really at all on this trip. We kind of focused on the walleyes. I think most people focused on the walleyes a little bit, especially once a 71.5-inch sturgeon got caught.
It would have been helped if that would have been caught the end of day 2, but instead it was caught right away day 1, wasn't it?
Right, it was, and everybody knew that was going to be tough to beat. And I don't know if this picture came from the Rainy. I'd assume it did, but Darren Troseth shared a picture that's been going around Facebook this week of a 74 by, I think it was 37.5 inches around or something, like just an absolute giant sturgeon. So maybe you know where it came from, Joe, but man, so that was a big fish.
You know what frustrates me though is, look at the size of that freaking fish. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder where that's at.
Yeah, you purposely didn't show the background, which I'm not surprised at, but I'd assume a fish that big is up on the Rainy, but I guess we don't know for sure. But we know that it's good. And it's funny, Andy Reeves snapped me the other day after the walleye season closed, and he was at Wheeler's Point, and he was the only truck he's the only truck at the access. So if you want to go up there right now and try to catch the biggest fish of your life, you got the river. It's just you and some other sturgeon anglers. You don't have the long lines that you have during the walleye season.
Well, you can fish through May 15th for sturgeon. And then, so sturgeon will either be a catch and release or a keep season. There is a keep season coming up. But you can fish sturgeon through May 15th, and then it stops all the way until July 1. Then July 1, you can start fishing them again, and then I believe it's a keep season then too. So you have a lot of opportunities. And, if you don't have the sturgeon tackle, you just need heavier rods and reels and that sort of thing. All the sturgeon rigs and no-roll sinkers that we talk about, they have all that at the bait shops up at Lake of the Woods. So they have all the tackle, just a little bit heavier gear if you have it. And, of course, having a bigger net or a tail lasso or something to that effect,
Bigger net helps. Just anchor up on a hole somewhere, turn your music on, sit back, maybe cook up some food like we did, and it is so much fun. I love it. All right, Joe.
I should say too, but for people that haven't done it, that whole area in front of all those resorts on the Rainy River is really good, right out in the channel. And then 4 Mile Bay is really good. You'll see some boats out there, but those two spots are primo spots, and they're right by the resort, so it's so easy.
Yeah, you don't have to go far. You don't have to use much gear, and you could catch the biggest fish of your life. It's a good time.
And people should know, like, those big sturgeon that are coming in. You know, I hope people understand that the state of Minnesota has a catch and release record now for sturgeon, and we had it on the Rainy River, and then the St. Croix River took it back. It's time, I think, the Rainy River gets it back. But I think 3/4 of the people don't even think about that. That they could be submitting for a record.
Yeah, for sure. Get your name in the book. And I, you know, it's going to come out of the Rainy River again, I think, for sure. No question about it. All right, Joe, if people want to plan a trip to Lake of the Woods, what should they do?
Check out our website, and that is lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
If you want to catch a big walleye, go where the big walleyes are. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital of the world, with a variety of resorts and lodging facilities offering full-service fishing. Lake of the Woods is also home to sturgeon, sauger, perch, trophy pike, muskie, smallmouth bass, burbot, and more. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods today. Go to lakeofthewoodsmn.com. That's lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
All right, this is Sporting Journal Radio. We're going to head up to the Duluth area now, the North Shore, to talk to Cory Goldsworthy. He's the Lake Superior Area Fisheries Supervisor. Cory, how's it going?
It's going good today. How are you?
Not too bad. Welcome back to the show. We like having you on because I feel like Lake Superior is such a unique part of Minnesota, and sometimes it's hard to say this, but sometimes I feel like it gets forgotten about when it comes to fishing, unless you're talking about, you know, the tributaries or steelhead fishing or something like that. But Lake Superior is an incredible fishery for a wide variety of species, and there were a couple of things in the news that I want to talk about, including brook trout, which was pretty big story. So I want to ask you about that here in just a second, and then of course I got to talk to you about lake trout because you know, in the last, 10 years it's been, Dan and I both have had this newfound fascination for Lakers and big lake trout specifically. And when it comes to Minnesota fishing for big lake trout, you can catch nice Lakers in a number of lakes up in the Northeast up there, but Lake Superior is the place to go for the big ones in the state. So I want to kind of get a handle on what the fishery is like right now when it comes to both of those species. But let's just talk overall. What are conditions like up there right now?
Right now, we're still kind of, it's a long spring. Winter doesn't want to go away. Overnights are still below freezing, so the steelhead run is barely starting. Smelt haven't shown up yet, so we're still, I want to say, a week or two away from, the good first run of steelhead coming in and smelt fishing. Folks have been out on the lake chasing coho pretty consistently since mid-March, and they've been doing really well on coho down near Duluth. And of course, lake trout are always out there. There's always good lake trout fishing whenever folks can get on the water. So for those tributary anglers, we're still a week or two away, but for, lake anglers, they've been out there for a while now.
We should talk about cohos a little bit just because of the table fare. And I think Sam Cook posted something on social media a couple of weeks ago, and he was down walking along the lake, and he ran across a shore angler. I think he caught a couple of them, and he was pretty excited to be taking home a couple salmon. So that's kind of a unique, maybe it's unique isn't the right word, but that's kind of a neat opportunity to be able to catch salmon in Minnesota too.
Oh, for sure. I'd say it's definitely unique. Anytime that you can shore fish from Lake Superior and have the potential of catching, coho, lake trout, brook trout, it just, helps us to reinforce the point that you don't need a big 30-foot boat to be able to fish Lake Superior. You have opportunities right there. So
real quick, before we get into this stuff, your title is Lake Superior Area Fisheries Supervisor. Is it as if Lake Superior wasn't enough? Is the area, is that just including tributaries, or do you got to deal with other lakes up there too?
No, it's just Lake Superior. So essentially from Duluth to the Grand Portage reservation boundary.
Well, that's still a pretty good stretch of water for sure up there. All right, well, let's talk brook trout and coasters. First of all, explain the name, because there was some debates going on Facebook about the name coaster. When this story came out, somebody said coaster, and all these people, these fishery experts from around the globe, tried to correct them. I believe you meant coastal or whatever. So coaster is the nickname. Tell people why they have that nickname up there.
Yeah, so it is coaster brook trout, and they get that nickname because they hold really tight to shore, right? I mean, my grandpa over in the UP grew up fishing brook trout just right off the rocks out of Marquette, and they called them rock trout back then. So, they hold super tight to shore. They don't really venture off into deep water, so, they typically run the coast, which is why they got the nickname coaster.
So that makes it even more interesting to learn that there's been spawning brook trout along the shoreline of Lake Superior in Minnesota. And that's the first documented time you've seen that, it sounds like?
It is, yeah. So, we have been doing tributary spawning surveys since the late 1990s. We know we have tributary spawning brook trout. But we didn't realize that there were shore or shoal spawning brook trout in Lake Superior as well. We know around Isle Royal there's a shoal spawning strain, and that is really what the current strain of coaster brook trout that we kin stock in Lake Superior is. It's an Isle Royal strain. So when we first discovered this population last fall, my initial thought is it's probably progeny of some of those Isle Royal strain fish that were stocked. But one of those fish was, tagged in Ontario about 170 miles away. Wow. And the other was one that we tagged within the same location that we genetically identified as a Minnesota strain fish. So we're not really sure what they are yet. So hopefully genetic testing will tell us what they are. And really that'll help guide, further management of coasters, and maybe it can even push us into a stocking for rehabilitation program and provide additional fishing opportunities for brook trout in Minnesota waters.
That's interesting because one of the theories is that maybe these shoreline spawning brook trout came from Isle Royal, but that's a pretty long I guess it's not as long of a swim when you talk about the tagging research that you just got that you just mentioned there, but it's a decent swim over deep water, which isn't common for them, or so we thought.
Correct. Yep. We know they'll travel long distances. We've tagged fish, north of Grand Marais that within, less than a week have been sampled or caught by anglers down by Silver Bay. So we know they'll travel long distances in a short amount of time. We don't think they travel over that deep abyss that we see along the North Shore.
So I just got a real quick bone to pick, and maybe you can shed some light on the subject. But, and maybe it's because you're from Michigan, and is that why we haven't tried to get Isle Royal from Minnesota? I mean, the whole country's talking about Canada becoming part of the U.S. How about we just start with Isle Royal becoming part of Minnesota first, right?
Yeah, right. Growing up over in the UP, that was part of the history lesson of Michigan was, I think it was Henry Schoolcraft or somebody when they were drawing the state lines. He was an older gentleman at the time and somehow circled Isle Royal into the Michigan state line and said something along the lines of, please excuse the slip of no man's hand. And thus Michigan gets Isle Royal, not Minnesota. So,
wow, that's how it happened. It's kind of almost like the story of the Northwest Angle a little bit, just right. some mapping errors. Huh. Has there ever been a push to try to get Isle Royal? There's been a push to try to get Isle Royal as part of Minnesota, hasn't there? Wasn't there talk about it?
I'm not sure. I haven't heard of that, so we'll see. Not off the table, I guess, right?
How would you feel about making that part of your fisheries area?
Isle Royal is some of the best fishing anywhere, so Done. To add that into our portfolio, I think would be quite well.
I'm starting a petition today. All right. I've never been out there. I would love to go out there and see it. And I know that's an area that a lot of people, I think, that go out from Minnesota, they go out there to target lake trout out in that area. So I'd assume you need a Michigan fishing license at that point. Yep. And we can get into more of that in the next segment when we start talking about lake trout. But let's get back to brookies for a second. Do you think that this is obviously good news? Do you think that population is doing really well? Do you think this is just a coincidence, or do you think that things are going well, that they're just looking for new areas to spawn?
Yeah, our lake-wide coaster brook trout surveys typically occur in June, and that's a shoreline electrofishing survey that's conducted at night. We know coaster brook trout obviously spawn in the fall. So if we're doing our sampling in June, we're not really sampling spawning populations. And that has kind of always been a question to us, are we sampling in the lake during the right time of year? The way we found out about this spawning population was an angler gave us kind of a hot tip of, hey, I see some brook trout really close to shore. I see some reds. It looks like spawning activity. So we deployed a crew out there and sampled well over 50 brook trout in short amount of time. So, we've always thought here in Minnesota that there are more brook trout out there than what our surveys show. And perhaps we've just been sampling at an inopportune time rather than when they're spawning, which typically in fisheries surveys, if you want to get the best data on what's spawning in your water, that's when you would do your surveys. So essentially everywhere we've looked, both in our tributary surveys and in our shoreline electrofishing surveys, we have found more brook trout populations. So I think perhaps they're doing better than what we suspect. We just might not be sampling them effectively. And that's why we've really recruited anglers as part of our coaster genetics project. We've recruited a lot of anglers to go out fish for coasters in these areas that we don't sample well, like those terminal pools right below a waterfall. We can't get in there with backpack electrofishing units and sample. We know there's big brook trout in there. We just can't get in there. So we've recruited anglers to sample for us and collect us genetic samples from the fish that they catch. And that has been a very successful program. And I think it was, something along the lines of anglers have collected more 12 plus inch brook trout in 3 years than the Minnesota DNR has done in like 7 surveys over 30 years. So wow. Anglers have the ability to catch these fish where we don't, and it's provided us with some fantastic data. And that program, that angler cooperative program, is being expanded to other jurisdictions across Lake Superior now. So
nice. Well, I think anglers enjoy being a part of it, and they've been asking to be a part of it for a long time. So that's great. I want to ask you a little bit about stocking, and then, how hard would it be to change the timing of your sampling and your surveys? Because, research goes on trends. It's hard to change it because you want to have a constant set of data to base trends on. So I want to ask you about that, but we got to take a quick break. More with Cory Goldsworthy when we come back on Sporting Journal Radio. Sick of eating tagged soup? It's time to own your odds this fall with OnX Hunt, the GPS hunting app trusted by millions of hunters. Now you'll have access to nationwide public and private land ownership information, waypoints, optimal win for each stand, tracks, and much more. All at your fingertips. Go to onxmaps.com/hunt and use code SJR20 at checkout to receive 20% off your membership. That's code SJR20. We're back, Sporting Journal Radio. This segment brought to you by Tasman Lake Lodge. Opening up June 14th, Trophy Lake Trout in Northern Park are waiting for you in scenic Northern Saskatchewan. Get more information about planning a trip to catch maybe the biggest fish of your life. Go to tasmanlake.com for more details. And we're going to talk about big lake trout in Minnesota right now, too, with Cory Goldsworthy. He's the Lake Superior Area Fisheries Supervisor. And before we get into Lakers, though, I just want to touch on brook trout and the coasters again here for just a second, because before the break, we were talking about how you do your sampling in June, and you're maybe starting to wonder if that's not the best time to be doing it. What would a solution to that be? Can you change your times? Would you have to start a new time to survey and continue the other one, or how would that work?
Yeah, so I think we're already, based on last fall's results of identifying shore spawning populations of brook trout, we're going to extend that sampling anyway. So we're already going to, coming into this year, set some time aside to be able to sample in the fall. We do have, through the Great Lakes Fishery Commission framework, through the Lake Superior Technical Committee, we have a rehabilitation plan for coaster brook trout, or for brook trout, and part of that is that lake-wide shoreline electrofishing that occurs in June. So we want to have a lake-wide time series that we can compare across jurisdictions, so we can make comparisons between rehabilitation efforts in Minnesota, Ontario, Michigan, Wisconsin, and other places. I imagine we're going to keep our June survey going and then just expand the fall surveys that we do for shoreline electrofishing to get a better idea of how many shore spawning populations are in Minnesota waters, and then compare those two seasons, compare June to October, and if we can make the case that hey, we're better reaching our goals of rehabilitation by doing these surveys in the fall when we're catching more of these fish that we know are spawning in our individual jurisdictions. I think that's really the path forward in getting a better handle on truly how many numbers of coasters are out there.
Is there any brook trout stocking being done up there?
Yep, there is. There's brook trout stocking being done by the Grand Portage Band just north of us here. They've been stocking brook trout, the Isle Royal strain of brook trout, since, I want to say it's 20 or 30 years now. So it's been a long time effort. We haven't seen a lot of returns, but typically we've been looking for returns to our rivers, not really out in the lake. So like I said, we've seen some of those clipped Grand Portage stocked fish in our tributaries, but up until this past fall, we haven't done shoreline electrofishing in the lake for spawning populations. So, I think we're just kind of maybe missing some things. And if we can show that, this Isle Royal strain is contributing to populations of brook trout within Lake Superior, maybe that's a way for us to get in the stocking game, or maybe to develop a new stocking strain ourselves here.
Are brook trout like the steelhead where they the tributary they come from, they return to? It's imprinted. The smell of the water, the taste of the water, the temperature. They remember that. They return to that. Are brook trout the same way?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we've seen just through our genetic work for Minnesota, what seems to be the case is the majority of coaster brook trout that we sample in Lake Superior can be genetically identified back to one of our rivers. And what we think is going on is we're getting fish from above barriers dropping below the barrier and then heading out to Lake Superior, where they have access to more resources, more food, more water, and they grow bigger. All of the genetic work that we've seen tells us that there is not a lot of natural reproduction occurring below our tributary waterfalls here in Minnesota. And it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, brook trout being a fall spawning fish, if you were up here this fall, you would see that, if we don't get rain, our tributaries run extremely low. And if we run extremely low and go into the winter, those tributaries will freeze completely to the bottom and no fish survive below the barrier. So, it kind of reinforces what we've thought all along about our fall spawning fish on the North Shore, coasters, cohos, chinooks, is the habitat below waterfall barriers is so inhospitable that we don't get much successful reproduction. We do know that coaster brook trout move from tributary to tributary in the fall, and they go through the motions of spawning, but we just don't see what we would call admixture in the genetics world, where we know it's a fish from the Baptism River spawning with a fish from the Gooseberry River, and the fish that's produced is a mix of those two. We just don't see that. So they do move around. We're just not seeing below barrier reproduction as far as we can tell. We've got some more genetic results coming out of Michigan State here, hopefully by the summer, that will give us a little more clarity into whether or not that is the case. So stay tuned. We'll have definitely more information here in the future.
So you're saying most of those coasters are actually coming from above the dams on the rivers, that the coasters that are getting caught along the lake or down in the bottom of the tributaries there, they're actually coming from above the dams, dropping out, and that's maybe why you don't see a lot of them. Do you think then that that's where some of these that are starting to spawn along the lake shore are they're just spilling into the lake?
Yeah. So, all the genetic work tends to tell us that, because when we did a big genetics project a few years back where we took genetic samples from brook trout caught above waterfall barriers, below waterfall barriers, and then in Lake Superior itself. And all of the fish in Lake Superior that we sampled, we could assign back to one of the tributaries. And the above barrier populations look identical. the above barrier populations look identical to the below barrier populations and vice versa. So, that tells us that we think the majority of fish that coastal brook trout that we see are from above waterfall barrier populations that drop out into Lake Superior. With the shore spawning, like I said, I'm not sure what they are yet, right? The most simplest answer is they're progeny of stocked Isle Royal strain fish, because in that genetics work, we do have some coasters that we can't assign back to a population. So either those are migrants from Isle Royal or Ontario or somewhere else that we don't have genetic information on, and then we can't assign them back to a population, or they're just, shore spawning Lake Superior brook trout that we don't have genetic material on yet. So that's why, it's critical for us to get these samples processed and see what genetics we can assign them back to, if any.
The brook trout along the North Shore up there, back 100 years ago, there used to be quite a few of them, right, in the rivers there?
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Yeah, so, if we can think back to a time prior to deforestation of the North Shore here, the tributaries were all choked with cedars, and the riparian areas were pristine. We had good flow, good cold water from headwaters to the mouth, and our streams were literally full of brook trout. And when you get to carrying capacity for habitat, any extra fish that are produced have to go find new habitat. So those fish that ran out of habitat in the tributaries went out to Lake Superior, saw essentially unlimited habitat and food, and that's where you get those 3, 4, 5 pound coastal brook trout from. Historically, there's records that we have from the 1850s talking about 200 plus fish being caught in a short amount of time at the mouth of the Knife River. So, it's what we call source sink population dynamics. Is once your source population produces enough where there's no more habitat available, they go out to Lake Superior, right? And when logging occurred or deforestation of the North Shore occurred, what happened was not only did you take the trees off the landscape, opened up the rivers to sunlight, but you also, with the slashing, you also caused a bunch of fires. And those fires destroyed the cold swamps that held that cold water, destroyed springs. And I've got some, biologists' reports from the 1920s talking about how water temperature had changed so much that brook trout were essentially gone. And the only solution that we had at the time was to stock brown trout or smallmouth bass in our tributaries. Fortunately, the resiliency of the landscape and the forest showed itself, and we have good brook trout populations on the majority of North Shore streams now. And, hopefully we can get back to that point, but it's, a lot of it is habitat related. Some of the damage that was done by, deforestation and habitat degradation and the forest fires, we might not be able to come back from. But that's why, going forward into the future, we're really interested in identifying cold water seeps and springs, which, brook trout completely rely on, especially during the summer months, and figuring out how we can protect those resources, those cold water resources into the future, because without cold water, we don't have brook trout. It's that simple.
Well, it's such a unique opportunity and just a beautiful landscape up there. It's so much fun to fish, whether you're in the tributaries or out on the big lake out there. I want to talk about lake trout here as well, because I feel like a couple of years ago there was good news about lake trout, and now some good news about brook trout. Overall, things seem to be going pretty well up there.
Yeah, things are going fantastic. We've hit what is considered pre-1940s levels for lake trout, which is pre-sea lamprey. The Lake Superior Committee of the Great Lakes Fishery Commission declared, lake trout populations restored to that time period, which is incredible. We've seen just some enormous 40 plus pound lake trout being caught out of Minnesota waters. We have good, stable recruitment of young fish into the adult population. And, we're entering really a time period that we would consider, we're kind of in maintenance mode with lake trout. We've spent 65 plus years rehabilitating populations. We need to be vigilant, particularly in regards to sea lamprey control. which is, if you take the foot off the gas, like we saw in COVID years, where, the Fish and Wildlife Service and Fisheries and Oceans Canada are the two federal agencies that do sea lamprey control. With COVID, they couldn't cross boundaries, and 2020 was a year where Lake Superior was supposed to get intensive treatment. Some of those treatments got done, a lot of them didn't, and we saw, actually Great Lakes wide, we saw a spike in sea lamprey abundance and sea lamprey wounding just because of 1 year of mistreatments. So we know we can't miss treatments in any year, really. So sea lamprey control still is probably the highest priority for conserving lake trout and any fish populations in the Great Lakes, because realistically, without sea lamprey control, we don't have a sport, commercial, charter, or tribal fishery in the Great Lakes. It's just that simple. So,
Cory,
it's really vigilance.
Hang on one second there, Cory. For our radio audience, we got to go to the podcast. So find us on YouTube or download the rest of this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. All right. Sorry about that, Cory. What else were you saying about it?
Without sea lamprey control, we really don't have a sport, charter, commercial, or tribal fishery in the Great Lakes. It's that simple. So from here on out, it's, maintaining vigilance through the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, who is tasked with controlling sea lamprey, and vigilance on the state and tribal fisheries agencies to monitor and, if we need to, limit harvest. So really, we're kind of in maintenance mode with lake trout. We're in a great position. A lot of lake trout out there, and every year we think we've hit carrying capacity for lake trout, and every year we seem to exceed that in each of our surveys. So lake trout are looking good. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of pictures from even this spring of lake trout being caught that almost every fish has sea lamprey wounds on it. So we know we're in kind of a, we're over 5 times as many, 6 times as many sea lamprey in Lake Superior as we would like, or as what our target is. And we're seeing, those effects of those mistreatments, but we know that's going to come down because there has been, more treatments that have been done by the Fish and Wildlife Service and Fisheries and Oceans Canada. So those numbers will come down. And the hard part is we've lost a lot of fish due to that increased mortality from sea lamprey. But, the nice thing, if there is a nice thing, the nice thing with Lake Superior is we have a huge Siskiwet population, or a fat lake trout population that is not table fare. Yes. And they're anywhere 10 to 100 times more abundant than lean lake trout. So what we think happens is those Siskiwets provide a buffer against lean lake trout being, the morpha type of lake trout that anglers are out there catching. So we think there's a little bit of a buffer effect, which helps leans, but we'll see. That's kind of a hypothesis at this point.
I'm glad you brought up Siskiwets, because that was literally my next question was about them, because with all the fishing we do up in Saskatchewan and on our lake that we fish all the time, Tasman, it's a deep lake. There's actually a 900-foot hole out there. There's a lot of 400 to 500 foot stretches, 200 to 300 feet. And there are just some giant fat lake trout. And there hasn't been they're so much fun. I love them so much. There hasn't been the research done on that lake that as there has on Lake Superior. So when it comes to are there leans and Siskiwets, are there different strains? What is it that we don't have data to back it up to say, yes, that is a Siskiwet, yes, that's a lean. But what I can tell you is we have a million, 2 to 10 pound lake trout that are in shallow water. To me, those are the leans. And then we have these giant fat lake trout that live a little bit deeper. So when I'm telling people about our lake up there, and if they're from a lot of people from Minnesota go up there, I tell them it's like Siskiwets on Lake Superior. We've got these big giant ones that live in the deep. And everybody wants to come up for the fall spawn and try to target some of those big ones when they come up shallow. And we've been up there a few times in the fall, and you'll get the, occasional 40-incher cruising the shallows, but they're sometimes kind of hard to find. And it's all about timing because it's such a short window for it. But after hearing about the Siskiwets spawning in, 300 feet of water on Lake Superior, talk about in the spring. So that, I mean, to me, that's like your head explodes when you think about that a little bit, because it takes everything you thought you knew about lake trout and throws it out the window.
Yeah, for as much as we thought we knew about Lake Superior and how good we think we are at our jobs, which we are, but to realize that there's an entire spring spawning population of Siskoets out there, right? It just goes to show that the surveys that we have been doing for the last 40 years have been geared towards lean lake trout restoration. And there's a whole lot of other lake trout populations out there doing things that are outside the norm, or what we would consider the norm, that we just haven't seen because we haven't sampled for them. Sean Sitar with Michigan DNR, has spent a lot of time on and around Isle Royal sampling the different morphotypes of lake trout out there. And, they have sampled gravid females in the spring, but until you actually identify, yes, there are eggs being laid in the spring and those eggs are hatching, it's not a spawning population. So Sean has done an incredible amount of work to identify that spring spawning Siskoet population. We know there's 4 what we call ecotypes or morphotypes of lake trout in Lake Superior: the leans, the Siskoets, the red fins, and the humpers. So they all look different from each other. They all occupy different habitats. They all have a little bit different diets, all have a little bit of different spawning behavior. Historically, it's thought that there were up to 17 different type of morphotypes in Lake Superior. So just through overharvest in the commercial fishery in the early times, sea lamprey predation, we've lost, anywhere from 13, 14 different morphotypes of lake trout. So, you talk about different types of lake trouts and where they are, up where you guys fish in Canada there, and it makes perfect sense. We can identify Siskoets just based on primarily their head shape. But just because a lake trout is big and fat doesn't mean it's a Siskoet, right? We see huge lake trout that have huge guts on them that are truly lean lake trout. We see small Siskoets that don't look fat that are Siskoets. So it really takes looking at primarily the head shape. And then when you get into red fins and humpers, which are more of the offshore shoal, like Superior Shoals, all around Isle Royal, those kind of offshore reef areas, that's where the leans or the red fins and the humpers like to be. And those you can tell a little bit by, fin length, coloration on their body, and size. And the humpers especially are kind of an odd one where, they barely get bigger than 20 inches, but they can be 40 years old at 20 inches. Wow. And, you flay them out and they look like a nice lean lake trout. They don't look like a Siskoet. They're not full of fat. So, there are these different morphotypes of lake trout that are out there. I imagine there are more lake trout out there doing things that we could never imagine. We just really haven't sampled for them yet. And, as lake wide, we're talking about this in our Lake Superior Technical Committee conversations is, all right, we've hit recovery of lake trout. The surveys that we're doing have been geared towards monitoring that recovery for 60 years. Are those surveys going to provide us with the data we need to manage lake trout 50 years from now? And if not, maybe we need to have a discussion about what surveys we should implement into our plethora of surveys we do every year, so we can have a better idea of what's really going on out there.
That's interesting. So the humpers, I'd assume that has something to do with their shape? Yep.
Well, it's partly not really their shape. It's mostly where they live. And historically, the commercial operators would call them humpers because they lived in those offshore humps or reef structure areas. That's where they were. So they look similar to a Siskoet. They have kind of that, bulging front gut to them, but they don't get big and they are not full of fat. So they actually eat fairly well. So, there's all sorts of weird.
This is just going to make me like, it's just going to make me like lake trout even more. And Dan, yeah, right. I'm going to give you a heads up. If you can try to find, I can maybe try to help you, but I caught, so up there in Saskatchewan, and I apologize for talking about a different lake when we're talking about Superior, but this is part of the reason I have this fascination with lake trout because of what we caught up at Tasman. And one day I was out there with one of the owners, Barry Prawl, and we were fishing about 100 feet and we were trolling, and we caught a number of fish that were 3 to 5 pounds. So nothing super big. I think we caught 6 or 7 of them, but they were jet black. Like, and some of the old guides up there used to talk about there being 4 different lake trout up there. And I'm trying to remember what he called them. I think he called them, he had all these names, superhero names for them, but it was like the Silver Surfer and the Green Lantern. So there's like a green one, more of one that was a little silvery. There was the black ones, and then I think the red fins. And Dan, that picture should be on the Tasman website, or I think it's in the pictures on the Tasman website or Tasman Facebook page. But so I'd seen some dark fish, and there's one river that comes in particularly that's a little more tannic. It's got some darker water. So a lot of times we catch some of the darker lake trout there. We'd attribute that to the stained water, to some of the coloration. And I remember back when I had my magazine, Michael Furtman wrote an article in it, and it was about the different lake trout and the different lakes in the boundary waters, and how you could just portage from one lake to another and catch a different colored lake trout, because it was in a different lake. So do you think these are different strains, or do you think that they're getting a lot of their coloration from where they're living or from what they're eating?
Yeah, I think it's both, right? I think they have adapted to the habitat that they're occupying. So that's why they look like they do. And we know that we can genetically separate a lean from a Siskowet, from a humper, from a redfin. So they're obviously discrete spawning populations, which in all aspects would tell you they're a different strain. But when we get into you got lumpers and splitters, and you got people that do like fish nomenclature and that sort of thing, and it gets weird why you can't call technically something a strain or not. But we call them morphotypes because they look different, they act different, they spawn in different areas, they occupy different habitats, they have different diets. So that's kind of where we are in the evolution of naming what we know of lake trout out there now. So that's kind of what we've gone with at this point. And at some point, I would imagine, we're going to get to a point where, yes, we can classify them as definitely separate strains, because they are genetically distinct.
When it comes to fishing for them, there it is right there.
Oh, yeah, look at that. That's incredible.
Look how black that is. I mean, I've seen dark lake trout. And we caught 5 or 6, and I've gone back to that same place and done the exact same thing, trying to target those fish and find them again, and we've never found them again.
Wow, what a beautiful fish.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a replica guy versus a skin mount guy, and we don't nobody takes any fish home from up there for anything. It's all replicas if you want to do a mount. But that is a fish I would put on the wall. Like, I couldn't believe it when I caught it.
Yeah, you'd imagine that it's, in stained dark water. It really wouldn't be depth related unless it's, not that clear of water. But,
it's crystal clear. It's and that was out in it was off an island, but that was basically out in the main lake. Now there is a bit of a current that runs through the main lake, and this was pretty close to where the old channel was, I think. But for the most part, I can run an underwater camera, inline underwater camera down 60 feet and get fish strikes on it without needing to have any sort of light, like on a sunny day. That's how good the light penetration is. And I can run an AquaView. I got an AquaView with a 120-foot cable on it, and I can drop it right down to the bottom. And when I get it close to the bottom, that bottom's lit up it's just reflecting so much light. So it's very clear water. So, but at 100 feet, I'm sure it's still pretty dark down there.
Right. Yeah. It's incredible because, lake trout, they're chars. They're not trout per se. And what we know of chars is that, they will adapt to the habitat that they're in. And you can have multiple types of chars occupying the same water, but they separate themselves based on habitat and food, right? Some of the work, like I said, Sean Sittar from Michigan out on Isle Royal, those spring spawning Siskowets are spawning in very small areas. It's not like they're broadcast spawning across an entire reef. It's very small areas of reef structures out there. So if you're a species that is only spawning with other fish that look like you, and you're only spawning in a small area, you're not going to get a whole lot of crossover from other fish, right? So it makes sense that you'd have those discrete genetic populations and discrete, colorations of fish, even in the same water body. But I have never seen a lake trout that dark. That's incredible.
Yeah, and I wish we could find them again. They're so cool. And we talk a lot about fishing deep, and lake trout are physostomas, so they're able to regulate and expel gases when they come up. So we do try to take it easy when we do fish for them that deep, and we try to really whenever we fish that deep, we always try to give them a break when they get up to around that 30 to 40 foot mark and try to expel some gases before we bring them up any further. And because they still can suffer some barotrauma symptoms. We did have one. We've had a couple actually. I love lake trout so much. They will eat so much. And a lot of times we'll use these big baits, Cory, and they'll when they come up, sometimes they'll try to regurgitate something they've eaten to get those gases out. And unfortunately, we've had a situation or two where they'll have their food, a fish that they ate earlier, will get lodged in their throat as they're trying to come up. But we have pulled, 20-inch lake trout out of the throat of 40-inch lake trout.
Oh yeah,
that still hit. A 6 to 15-inch bait. They're just so aggressive. They're so much fun.
Yep.
Okay, so I want to just back up when we're talking about depths like that, and the reason I wanted to say all that is because how did he? And we don't have to go into. We just have a couple of minutes left here, so we don't have to go too in depth on this. But how the heck did he find them spawning at 300 feet?
Yeah. So in their surveys out there before, they have seen, like I said, gravid females, right? So they already had kind of this hypothesis running that there are spring spawning, or there might be spring spawning populations out there. So what they did was they went back out and collected a bunch of fish and put in what are called acoustic tags, and then dropped down acoustic receivers. So essentially this tag, when it gets close to a receiver, puts out a sound wave, and that receiver records that individual identification number on that tag, so you know what fish you put it in. So they put out an array of acoustic receivers, tagged a bunch of fish, and the acoustic array data showed them that there was a collection of fish, or a high number of fish in one certain area during the spring, which would tell us that, hey, maybe there's a spawning population there. And then they sent down an underwater drone to collect eggs and collect sculpin, which are a small little bait fish that occupy the bottom, but we know them as egg eaters. And they were able to collect lake trout, Siskiyou lake trout eggs in the spring on the bottom and in sculpin bellies. So they were by far known now as a spring spawning Siskiyou population. So Sean's a great guy. I call him Mr. Lake Trout for Lake Superior because he's been doing this for a long time, and he is by far probably the best knowledge and understanding of lake trout, because he, being able to sample around Isle Royal, he sees all these different morphotypes and then some. Right? He has crosses, so like a Siskiyou or a lean or a humper and a redfin, or a redfin and a Siskiyou. He thinks that there's all these crosses out there as well. So it's really neat to sit down with him and talk about his experiences, especially on Isle Royal.
Before we let you go, you had a fisheries meeting last week. What was that all about?
We did, yeah. We're up to having to update our 10-year plan for fisheries management on Lake Superior. It's a plan that really does set our schedule for the next 10 years of the field work that we do and what we focus on. So 2025, we are convening the group, Lake Superior Advisory Group, stakeholder groups, the general public, and revising our management plan. So we'll hit on everything. We'll hit on lake trout management, steelhead management, non-native salmon management, the commercial fishery, charter fishery. We'll hit the whole gamut of everything Lake Superior. So, our current plan is, 60, 70 some pages long. So it's essentially a historical document plus a document that looks out into the next 10 years of the work that we're going to do. It's great. It allows us to compile all of the data that we've collected and our knowledge that we've collected over the last 10 years of work on Lake Superior and get that out to folks, because all too often, we do these surveys, we write reports, and those reports, sit in a file cabinet, or I guess an online or an electronic file cabinet now, and they really don't get read. And now these days it appears nobody wants to read a 30-page report anymore. So This really gives us the opportunity to be able to present live in front of people and show them the work that we do, show them the work that's been done around all of Lake Superior, and then formulate our management plan for the next 10 years. So it's really one of my favorite times of work, because we get to interact with anglers and the public at a really high level.
You just need to put it on TikTok these days, I think, is what you...
Well, I spent the majority of my day today trying to figure out how to record PowerPoint presentations and closed caption them. So that's what we're hoping to get, is online recorded presentations that people can kind of digest at their leisure, because that seems to be how people want to kind of digest their information now. I get it. I don't want to read our own reports, right? They're long. they're full of data, right? Tell me in 10 seconds what I need to know. Right. I get it. So hopefully we're on that route now, and we can start talking to our stakeholders in the words that they want to hear, right?
Well, are you anticipating any big changes that people should be aware of?
Big changes. I think the biggest change is, we really need to focus on our steelhead goal. The goal for the last 20 plus years has been to rehabilitate steelhead populations to allow limited angler harvest. In the last 10 years, we've seen steelhead numbers decline by 80% at the Knife River Trap. This is due to environmental conditions. We're caught in this drought flood cycle where either we get all of our rain at one time and it blows out the rivers and it blows out the fish, or we don't get any rain at all. There's no normal anymore, which is unfortunate, and we're seeing that in our steelhead populations. So we know that our North Shore tributaries, just with their habitat, they can't produce a lot of steelhead. So let's maintain the natural runs of steelhead that we have now. Let's protect those fish like we have. It's a catch and release only regulation now on wild steelhead. Let's make that permanent. We have hatchery wild strain steelhead that we can clip and stock for harvest opportunity. So I think we have the best of both worlds. We can stock clipped fish for harvest opportunity. I think we'll have surplus fish, unclipped fish that we can stock to bolster our wild populations, and we'll be protecting our wild populations that spawn below the barriers, which we know is limited, and we can kind of create the best of both worlds for everybody out there. So I think steelhead is one we definitely have to focus on. Take rehabilitation off the table, because if we can't control environmental conditions, and thus we shouldn't think that we can rehabilitate populations to sustain any harvest opportunities, really. But we do have a hatchery product we can stock for harvest, so I think we can focus on that, and like I said, provide the angling opportunities for catch and release anglers as well as harvest anglers out there. I've been thinking about this for a while now. We've been working on developing this brood stock for 7 years, and I think we're in a great position. And I'm not sure anybody out there would disagree with that is the most logical way forward for steelhead management. So,
last question for you. There's a public input request for changing the start and end dates for open season at trout fishing. What's that all about, and what's the proposed change?
Yeah, this was an effort that was started, a couple of years ago now, statewide, to simplify regulations. And the North Shore trout regulations below barriers have always fallen outside of the statewide regulations, or open and close seasons. So this was a way, as the DNR statewide, to try to simplify regulations, meaning let's get the North Shore in line with statewide regulations. So then the closed season is closer to the end of September rather than the beginning of September. We really don't see any biological need not to go that route. We think that, it's supported through the data that we have that, it's okay if we open up these trout populations below barriers to the end of September. The other one was Atlantic salmon bag limit of 1. That was a relic from the 1980s when we were stocking Atlantic salmon. and to conserve the fish that we were stocking, only one was allowed in a bag limit. So that's really one of those regulations that doesn't really mean anything anymore. Nobody catches Atlantic salmon anymore. So let's get it off the books. So that's really the gist of that effort. That really didn't, like I said, it didn't start here out of our office through our management planning process. It was more of a DNR statewide effort to let's simplify regulations, because I'm sure, as everyone is aware, they can get quite complicated.
Yeah.
The easier we can make it for folks to digest our regulations, the better we're off in the long run.
It's so funny because everybody thinks the regs are too complicated. So then the DNR simplifies them. Well, then everybody gets mad because they're, that's not the regs that they want. Well, we need to protect this plate. Well, it's so hard to make it feasible for everybody to understand and enjoy and agree with. It's a tough gig for sure. All right, Cory. Fascinating stuff. I could talk trout with you all day, but we're going to let you go. If people want to comment on any of those changes, the Minnesota DNR website is where you can go for that stuff. And you can find it in the news section there. And Cory, anything else you want to say about Lake Superior for the people out there?
Just folks, keep an eye out. There will be public opportunities for comment coming up here shortly, and as the draft plan is developed. So, we'll try to get news releases out there when those opportunities arise for folks, and get your input into us.
Awesome. Cory Goldsworthy, Lake Superior Area Fisheries Supervisor. Thanks for the time today on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sporting Journal Radio is a division of Macaba LLC. If you've got a question, comment, or story idea for us, send us an email. Go to sportingjournalradio.com. While you're there, you can learn how to advertise on the show and visit our store for hats, hoodies, coffee mugs, and more. Go to sportingjournalradio.com.